Well, hi, and welcome to another segment of While We're Apart. We've been talking this week about being a good neighbor, and this is really a time in the history of the world that we need to focus on that, because there are people that are hurting. There are people who have needs, and of course, we're probably some of them. But really, we do a good thing to ourselves when we get out of ourselves, when we stop being inward, and we focus on the needs of other people, being a good neighbor. We were talking yesterday about the Good Samaritan, and Jesus is telling the story of a man who went from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among thieves, and they beat him up, and they left him basically to die. Well, a priest goes by and blows him off. A Levite goes by and he blows him off. But a Samaritan comes along and he stops. Now, this story is being told to an attorney or a lawyer, as it were, a doctor of the law, somebody who wore the law on his sleeve, his phylactery. And so there he was with the Torah on his very sleeve. And Jesus Christ was telling him the story of the Good Samaritan because this man had tempted him, saying, well, who is my neighbor? You know, trying to find this out. And Christ basically tells him that his neighbor is the Samaritan. In Luke 10:33, Jesus says, but a Samaritan as he journeyed came where he, the wounded man, was. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him. He felt for him. He stopped to feel for him. He stopped to hurt for him. He's taking a trip inside the broken heart of another. And being a good neighbor really is one life connecting with another. You know, real compassion doesn't sit still. And we find that the Bible says that this Samaritan went to this wounded man. It denotes him having to go down into the ditch where the man was. He went to him. And it goes on and it says he bound up his wounds. And by the way, this is in the Gospel of Luke. Luke was a doctor. He understood what it meant to bind up wounds, to put in the oil to soothe the wound, to put in the wine with the alcohol content to disinfect it, and then to bind it up. And then Jesus says he took the man and he put him on his own beast. He took care of him overnight. Doesn't even know him. And that guy's a Jew and he's a Samaritan. But he says to the innkeeper before he leaves in verse 35 of our text, when I return, I'll pay you more if you have to pay it to take care of this man. In other words, I'm going to come back and even check on him. Now, here's the burning question. When Christ was all done in verse 36, he said to this lawyer, which now of these three thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? The three he's referring to there are the Levite, the priest, and the Samaritan. And he says to this Jewish lawyer with the phylactery on his sleeve, he says, which now of these three thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? Well, the lawyer's jaw just drops to the ground. Was he really a good neighbor? Well, not at all. And really the fact that this Samaritan was not a fellow countryman, he was not a friend, it had nothing to do with him being a good neighbor. And because really those things have nothing to do with it. Where the person lives, their color, their skin, their financial status. Who was really the good neighbor to this wounded man? And the question, the burning question now has been posed to that lawyer. Well, there's a long pause. Well, Jesus had all day. He's going to make him say it. He's going to make him say Samaritan. But he couldn't say it. In verse 37, he, the lawyer, said, instead of Samaritan, he said, he that showed mercy on him. In other words, he's just going to describe it with adjectives. He's not going to even say the word Samaritan. He that had mercy on him. And then Jesus said unto him, go and do thou likewise. Now here's this lawyer and he's been caught. He's beat red. He was going to ensnare Jesus, remember? That was a dumb idea. I mean, trying to corner God. Can you imagine? You could have an IQ off the charts and still look like a fool. And this man now looked like a fool. And so Jesus made it clear what it meant to be a good neighbor. Now, there are those who read this passage, and to them, it sounds like Christ is promoting a work salvation. You know, he's kind of leading this man along to this thought of, working your way to heaven. But no, Jesus wasn't thinking of a work salvation at all. Jesus often strung people along to help them get a point. You know, when Philip saw this crowd of people come to eat one day, Jesus said to Philip, how are we going to feed all these people? Jesus knew how he was going to feed them. He's going to multiply the loaves and the fishes. But he wanted Philip to think. And then there was a time with Peter where Peter was wondering, are we supposed to pay taxes or tribute money? And Jesus actually put the question to him first. And Peter's thinking about it. The Lord just tried to get people to think. You know, after the resurrection of Jesus on the road to Emmaus, the Bible says he made as though he was going to go further. He knew he wasn't going to. He knew he was going to stay that supper there with those folks in that lodge and those two guys and reveal himself to them. But it says he made as though he would go further. I find that interesting. You know, God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Was he really going to have him go through with it? No. He just wanted to see if he was willing. And so it's not unlike the Lord to lead this lawyer along to try and get him to see something, that he was very self-righteous and he didn't treat his neighbor as he did himself. But what about us? What kind of neighbor are we? You know, it's a good time in history, globally, it's a good time to major on compassion. It's pretty rare in society, and honestly, it's sadly a little bit rare amongst Christian people. You know, if we had a whole church full of compassion, it would be great. The community wouldn't need us saturating the neighborhoods with tracts and advertising if they saw this all the time from us. In fact, this would be an irresistible church. It'd be one they couldn't stay away from. Now, we don't know what happened to that lawyer. Maybe he stuck around till the crowd left and him and the Lord talked alone. We don't know, but we do know this. You and I have an opportunity at this time to be a compassionate neighbor. And God help us to ditch our own selfishness, our self-absorption, and stop driving by people in need and walking by people in need, and take the time to be a good neighbor. Well, I'll be finishing up with this series tomorrow, so join me back here then. With that, have a great day.
When we asunder part, it gives us inward pain, but we shall still be joined in heart and home.